Hello and welcome to the Friday, March 10th edition of the OSU Sports Extra podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Dean Ruhl in Stillwater. Dean, let's start with the obvious question. OSU Cowboys NCAA tournament, in or out?
Right now, Patrick, I think you're looking at somewhat of a coin toss, but I would lean toward out after how everything else landed in the field last night. Obviously, I don't think you penalize OSU too much for losing to Texas just because Texas is a top 10 team, the number 2 seed in the conference. I don't think you would penalize them a ton for that, but a lot of the other games that affect the bubble and the who's fighting for a tournament spot still fell. They didn't fall in OSU's favor, some of those outcomes. And Joe Lunardi, he put out his bracketology update about an hour ago, Patrick, and that kind of reflects what I'm saying. OSU is projected as the first team out of the tournament after ending last night as the last team in the tournament. That mainly comes because Arizona State scored a pretty big win against USC. The past 2 nights, Patrick, I've watched Arizona State basketball at 10:30 p.m. I think that's the best way to encapsulate. It's finally March, but with all that said, I'm not writing them off completely 100% just yet, but Joe Lunardi's a pretty accurate indication of who makes the tournament. I think last year he got 67 of the 68 teams that made the field correct. So seeding is one thing, but he's pretty spot on with who makes the field. So I have to somewhat agree with him saying that OSU might be the team that just barely misses it.
So after the loss to Texas and after the previous day's win against OU, it seemed OSU was in. And they were saying all through, they were saying all through the OU game on the broadcast that, OSU with a win, they're likely in. But but you've detailed what's happened since and why now it doesn't look that good. Could it get even worse for OSU in the coming days as we lead up to Selection Sunday here in 2 days?
I don't think it gets much worse. At this point in the week, especially in other conference tournaments as they're hitting the semifinals, then eventually the finals, it's going to be good teams versus good teams. So I don't know how much you can really move teams and slide around. I mean, looking at this yesterday, Pittsburgh was one of the last 4 teams to get a bye, to not play in the play-in round in Dayton, and they lost by 26 to Duke. And all they've done is just kind of slide down into that play-in round in Dayton in Joe Lunardi's eyes. And I think there's not going to be a ton of movement. Really, to me, I think there's really one spot open, one spot that people are still kind of fighting for, and it's that last spot. And I think Arizona State's in the mix, Oklahoma State's obviously in the mix, and then also Clemson, Patrick. They could score a pretty big win against Virginia later today, and they're 23-9. And I get they're playing the ACC, and the ACC basketball is kind of in a down year right now, but 23-9, they could be 24-9 at the end of today. And how do you compare that to an 18-15 OSU record? Obviously the Big 12 gets propped up, and I agree with it that it's probably the strongest basketball conference this year in the country, and the numbers back that up, and the teams back that up. But how much? Really, I think the question going into Sunday is how much does OSU playing in the Big 12 help or hurt them? Is it enough to be able to say, hey, they played in the Big 12, they finished the conference under 500, but it's in the Big 12, and are they in just off that merit, Patrick? That's I think the storyline of, is that enough for them to get in just because they're in this conference?
Let's say they sneak in the tournament. What do you expect out of them in the tournament?
I think that they'd land on the 11 line, and they'd be playing most likely up in Dayton in that play-in round. And Patrick, I'm not a big fan of the play-in round. I don't know. I've never been a fan of that. I don't even know. Do do you consider the playing round part of the tournament? Because it's not really the first round. It's just this weird little pigtail on the end.
Right.
But looking at the teams that they could run into, I'm not saying they couldn't beat any of these guys, but I also think OSU right now is very short-handed, Patrick. They're a pretty banged up team, and that's hard. And I think you saw that a little bit against Texas when you only have 9 scholarship players available to play against a team like Texas. That's a hard thing to do. And obviously these other teams that would fall on the 11 seed line aren't Texas caliber teams, but they're still good teams. I mean, Arizona State, Utah State, Pittsburgh, Rutgers, they all have over 20 wins this season. They were all, in the mix. They've been competitive this year, just like Oklahoma State. But I'd say that playing round's a coin toss just because of the quick turnaround in Dayton, Ohio against teams you haven't really scouted or seen this year. I think it's a coin toss. And then, I would imagine it'd be a short trip if they make it to, if they make the field, be it they win the playing round or they lose the next round. I just would imagine that Oklahoma State's just not really in a position to make a run just because of how kind of banged up they are.
Remind us how banged up they are. Kind of give us a little sense of that.
Yeah, so anybody who's watched this year kind of knows Musa Cisse's been dealing with some stuff with his left leg, and that's lingering around at this point in the year. And Chris Harris Jr. suffered an injury against OU. He didn't play at all against Texas. The severity of that is currently unknown. They're going to have more as the team gets back to Stillwater and they're able to run some tests on him. And Tyreek Smith got a little banged up last night against Texas. Obviously Avery Anderson too. I was going to say I'm forgetting somebody. Avery Anderson's been out. So yeah, there's some injuries going on right there. They're shorthanded, and on top of that, Patrick, they don't have all their scholarship spots because of the NCAA violations from last year. So super shorthanded team right now.
Yeah. All right, Dean, let's take a real quick break and let's talk some spring game football. All right, Dean, so OSU announced, was it this week or last week, that they were not going to have a spring game. They're going to have kind of a fan event instead due to the construction at Boone Pickens Stadium. Your thoughts on OSU not having a spring game?
Yeah, I think look at it both ways, Patrick, and that might be journalism's kind of ruined me in that point. I can see both sides a little bit. Yeah, obviously there is construction at Boone Pickens Stadium. It's all the equipment's all over the field. Half the stands are ripped out. Now, I don't think there's enough people going to this event to where you couldn't put it on the other side of the stadium. Just have seating on the other side of the stadium, the south side of it. But regardless, I think it's more so they've spent all this time getting all this equipment out onto the field to take it all off just for a spring game. You could maybe argue that's counterproductive to the whole thing. And I think that's fine, Patrick. I've never understood the allure from a fan perspective of going to a spring game or following a spring game. It's just kind of practice. I get it's a way for people to get to see some new players and how new signees are doing. But regardless, I think OSU probably could have done something better than just a 30-minute meet and greet with players. That seems like a very short amount of time to give fans.
Not a long time.
No, it's not. And I was reading somewhere, Patrick, and I should have written it down because I knew we were going to talk about this, but I wonder if they could have just maybe because these things it's not 50,000 people trying to go to this thing, Patrick. Years past have proven that. Why couldn't they just move it a couple blocks, a couple miles away from Boone Pickens Stadium down to the high school stadium at Stillwater High School? I mean, that's a pretty big stadium. If you want to put on something for the fans, there's a field right there. There's enough seats right there. I thought that could have been a solution. That could have been a pipe dream maybe, but I'm sure there have been other football teams who have run into the same issues, who have done the same thing. I think that's my thoughts on it, Patrick. In worst case, in the middle of April, not getting to watch football, go see a baseball game, go see a softball game. There's other things to do. Hey, go take your family out to a picnic. It's nice. It's gonna be sunny, I'm sure. I don't think it's the worst thing, but I think they could have done something better than just 30 minutes for fans to meet players.
Have you seen much chatter on, excuse me, I've got to clear my throat. Have you seen much chatter on Twitter about this? Are fans fired up one way or the other?
Yeah, I think just with it being a spring game, it's indifferent. And especially this, Patrick, if I think it helps too that they are, by getting rid of this spring game, I think it gives them an extra practice, and they do have 33 new players. They have like a fourth of their roster is new. So hey,
Yeah.
and a new defensive coordinator. So maybe, taking away the spring game and adding on that extra practice during this spring portion gives you a little bit more time to kind of get this team familiar with each other. And, I think that's helpful at the end of the day, Patrick. But I think some fans, you get a lot of fans who say, this is kind of Bush League on OSU's part. I think you have others who say, I wouldn't have gone if they had it anyway.
Yeah, if I'm an OSU fan, I'm disappointed by this decision. I really am. And you're right. It's a spring game. It's not really a game, but I think it's part of its goodwill. People do show up, and football is a 12-month sport around here in these parts. And like you said, there's a lot of new players. I think it'd be great to see some of these new players for the first time. I'm just not a fan of this decision. I go showcase your program, have a spring game, have, whoever wants to come watch, hold it for that amount of people. I don't go to Stillwater High. That would seemingly be a good solution. I don't see big time programs canceling their spring game. I mean, do they? I mean, I don't, it just doesn't seem like a thing a big time program does. We're just going to cancel the spring game. And I love the idea of a meet and greet. Don't get me wrong. That's a great idea. And it's really nice that they do that, but boy, 30 minutes just doesn't, do you know the logistics of the meet and greet? 30 minutes just doesn't sound like a long period of time to me.
Yeah, it's not, because I assume it's going to be a situation like if you're going to a convention and they have a couple athletes there, and people get in line to get the autographs, or just say hello to a player. That's what it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be lines to meet some of these guys. And if you want to meet some of the more popular players on this OSU roster, I think it's going to be, you got to stand around for 10 minutes waiting to just say hello. I don't think 30 minutes works logistically or from a fan perspective, because like you said, Patrick, if you want to be that big time program, I don't think getting rid of the spring game is what you do. I think I think your point to that is 100% true. If you want to be in that upper echelon, this is something you need to do. I think you need to have some more availability to the fans to be able to interact and see this team and be around it and be able to get excited. I'll say one thing about a spring game, Patrick. I've never seen somebody walk away from a spring game and be disappointed for the upcoming fall schedule. There's always that, everybody's always happy at the spring game, like, oh, this team's going to be great next year. You never see somebody say, oh, that's it, we're going 3-8 this year. You never hear that. It's always optimism around the spring game. I think OSU football needs some optimism right now within the fan base.
Well said, Dean. You're 100% correct. And you're spot on. Everything you just said. Yeah. Goodwill, 100%. Couldn't agree more. All right. Let's, we done on that? You want to add something else? You want to end on a really good point there, like you did?
I think we're good to wrap it up there. I know.
Okay.
Believe it or not, Patrick, spring practice for them starts in 10 days. I feel like we just got done covering that football season.
Wow. Yeah. It's hard to believe. Well, it'll be good. It's, springtime again is a time to kind of maybe get to know some of these players a little bit if you're allowed. and they got a lot of them, a lot of new kids. So we'll see how that goes. All right, let's kind of go back to some Big 12 hoops on the women's side of things. Talk about a team that is a tournament team, JC Hoyt's Cowgirls. What's going on with them?
Yeah, so they enter as the 4 seed in the conference. They're going to play West Virginia here in a little bit, Patrick, about 45 minutes till they tip off, and they've kind of squarely been in the tournament field for the season. I think right now, trying to talk and pull it up at the same time, but when I looked yesterday, they were an 8 seed, and they would have played Georgia. Yep, so they're still an 8 seed. They're projected to play against Georgia in the first round, and then more than likely play top seed Stanford in the second round. So I'd say regardless of if they lose to West Virginia, they might move down a spot or two, but they're pretty much they're going to be in, Patrick. They're going to be in this field. No matter what really happens in the Big 12 tournament. Now if they go and they win the thing, they can still fight for some position in the national tournament. If they go and win this, I doubt they do, because I think OU and Texas are just a hair above them this year in terms of talent and skill. But they can maybe move up to the 7 line, Patrick. I'd say that's optimistically possible. But regardless, if they lose today, they're not getting bumped out of this at all.
All right, let's chat a little wrestling before we get out of here. Next weekend, of course, the NCAA Wrestling Championships are at the BOK Center a couple of weeks after the BOK Center hosted the Big 12. What do you expect we'll talk maybe more about that next week. We'll get a little more deeper into it. We're kind of hoping to get John Smith on our podcast. We'll see how that goes. It's if I understand you right, we're trending in the right direction. So hopefully we'll get to talk to Coach Smith. But just kind of briefly, what do you expect at OSU at the NCAA tournament?
Patrick, I know you have some experience covering OSU wrestling in the heyday and being around that program. I think it's kind of, and I saw some commentary when brackets were released on Wednesday for this team. There's only two wrestlers OSU has with a top 10 seed, and that's Dayton Fix at number 2 at 133 pounds, and Dustin Plott with the 5th seed at 174 pounds. Everybody else is 10 or lower. And Patrick, I know you were around. I mean, that's got to be kind of weird to see only 2 wrestlers in the top 10 at their weight for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, it's a little unusual, for sure. But but they did get is it Wyatt Sheets who was kind of maybe on the fringe about getting in, and he did get in?
Yeah, so he got an at-large bid. They had 8. The Big 12 got 8 allocations to make the tournament to make nationals from the Big 12 tournament. So he finished 9th. So he needed an at-large bid. He got that. So he's going to be the 31st seed at 165. And funny enough, Patrick, he entered 2 years ago as an at-large bid, the 33rd seed, the last in his weight class. And he went on to win All-American status. He's the first wrestler ever to be the last seed in and finish as an All-American. So Wyatt Sheets is more than capable of going on a run. He's proven that. Another guy who really interests me, Patrick, also from the Tulsa area, is Reese Whitcraft. And he stepped in super late in the season at 125 and lost some duels right off the bat. And then he wrestled his butt off in Tulsa last weekend, finished 3rd at his weight. He also enters as the number 31 seed at 125, and I think he's a wild card. He's the ultimate wild card for OSU. He could do something. He's wrestling like he's got nothing to lose, and I think that makes somebody dangerous.
Yeah. All right, what are you doing this weekend?
Well, Patrick, I think softball. We should probably mention this, Patrick. Softball has a top 10 matchup this weekend. They're number 3. And number 6, Florida State is in town Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I hope to get out there for one of those. And other than that, Patrick, I think we've got some really good wrestling content coming to our website in the next couple of days. I'm hammering away at it this weekend. So if everybody wants some good build-up for nationals in Tulsa next week, give that a listen. or give that a read, excuse me.
And of course, Selection Sunday is, well, Sunday.
Sunday. Yeah.
So it'll be, it's a great time of year already just with basketball, but with, some of the other things you mentioned, it's even better. But next week, it's going to be a nice little bookend. We got Selection Sunday and then NCAA wrestling at the end of the week. So it's going to be a good week.
It will.
All right. So you done? You good?
I'm good.
All right. Well, hey, listen, we appreciate you checking us out. You can download us for free at Google, Apple, or Spotify. Dean and I usually record once a week, and we're happy you checked us out, and we'll talk next week. Dean, appreciate the knowledge.
Of course.